So tell me more about this series, Sapphic in the Field. How did it come to be?
Working with Valentina is just a beautiful process. It's very a natural sort of development of responding to each other. We initially selected a lot of small works, and I guess it's developing and evolving over time, thinking like we need some more pieces for it, and we're building up this slowly. And then we thought of the title for the show, Sapphic in the Field, and looking at the works now together. They are all collections of different times and different travels, different places, and mostly I like to work away from the studio. I feel like a lot of paintings arrive by engaging with new environments and being in different strange places, because it serves inspiration and spontaneous elements that I can't predict in the studio. And then I had this bundle of work, and together with Valentina we made a selection of the works that already existed. Looking at all the works now, it feels like a closure of a period of time where I had to travel a lot and I had to find my way, moving from the Netherlands to the UK, not being able easily to get my visa, and I had to go to France, and I found a place to stay in an old barn in France, and I went to Florence for a residency period. So there's like paintings made in Wales, there's paintings made in Florence, and I made them on the spot. And for me that is referring to being in the field, and like field as a sort of like allegory for the world, because being out in the open and in an open space that you don't really feel by anything defined is for me a very, like, it's referring to childhood, growing up between the fields and wandering through open space and imagining yourself becoming different than something is sort of placed upon you or defines you. And I felt that through all these works, being in different places, and yeah, it's a collection of time and place.
I mean, you really do build these worlds. Like, we have this interior here, there seems to be some like wooded forests and other ones, and it's so much fun to go into them with you.
Sometimes it's very abstract, sort of open space, and that means I'm more in a sort of emotional space with making the paintings, and where I'm more engaged with the feeling I'm sitting with. And sometimes, like for instance, this painting is one of the first portraits where a good friend of mine, Britt Lieberg, is portrayed. And that is something evolving now in my work, that I'm becoming more aware of memory in my work. So this is a collection of memory, and we were wearing costumes in one place and we were together in the other place. And I think in your memory sometimes things merge and they tend to like become a collection of places and times and fragments of details that you remember, but also the feeling overall of a really good friendship. I wish to paint more from that rather than looking directly to what is in front of you or observing, because it says a lot about how you sort of like storage your experiences of life, and that looks different for everyone. And that's also how I paint the self-portraits. They're all from imagining, fantasizing, and memorizing myself. And I think to be able to be in that state of not looking at yourself but experiencing yourself, the outcome is a creative and visual result. But I think we can do that in many ways. Like, we can write stories, we can make music, which are sort of like echoes of our being.
Yeah. Do you do anything to sort of trigger the conditions of those memories? Yeah,
I think I write a lot. I write daily. I guess because it's so introspective, my work, and sort of psychoanalytical, writing helps to create a sort of bridge between being like a real person in the world and moving around and experiencing and being sort of the subject to creation. And then I write letters to myself, which I address as the painter, sort of like this fantasy idea of like I want to become a painter and I'll paint myself into becoming. And it's like, I think it grew from the sort of first of frustration of not being able to go to an art school and being rejected, and like I was having this sort of attitude of like I'm going to do it myself now. That means I'll just have a conversation with art history or my own thoughts, and that has grown so much that it almost became a sort of symbol of creating, finding like, oh, I can actually have a conversation with my imagination, and that is a source of inspiration that will inspire me to make a painting. And that is a constant thing. I feel like it's endless because I'm getting older, I'm having more experiences, the memories are sort of locked up somewhere, and writing is sort of following that. And the same counts for drawing. If I can't find words for something, drawing will tell me what it's about. So I made these red drawings daily, which is grown into like a sort of memoir of drawing. I think drawing is the most pure form of creating. Like with painting, you think about material and the steps you want to pursue, and it matters in how you build up a painting and how the result comes out. But with drawing, it's just literally just like this direct line into your hand and the state you're in your mind. And it surprises me the most because I sometimes draw something and it's like, wow, I didn't know that about myself.
Yeah, drawing can be so automatic.
Yeah.
Speaking of size and material, I want to ask you about scale in your works. I mean, we're sitting next to one of the larger paintings in the exhibition, but many of these portraits are just a bit larger than a piece of printer paper, which is sort of breaking from a tradition, I think, of portrait painting where the subjects are much larger, sometimes life-size, sometimes larger than life. How do you think about scale in relation to your works, and why some of the smaller scale paintings?
Mostly in the process of making, it's a very intuitive thing. I don't always sit down and think like I have this idea in my head, I need like this kind of size for it in order to make it happen. Because most of these works are during travels, I bring material that is intimate enough to do it alongside a field or in a little cottage. Or it interests me though that overall, like with big portraiture, like it's a matter of saying like showing status, or sort of like a power statement of like I am portrayed and that this is like imposing size. And I guess with small size portraits, people are asked to engage in a very intimate and personal way. Like for me, it happens during the process of making. Like it becomes very intimate, and you almost become like iconographic in a way. And I like that because the use of really big size, you have to really think about it, what it means. Is it just to make a great imposing work? Or does the size actually add something to the meaning of the work? And there's one really big painting in this show, and the title is based on it. I gave it 2 titles, which is Looking at the World and Sapphic in the Cornfield. And it's one of many big paintings I was doing because I really wanted to have a life-size engagement with the figure in the painting. It's a very emotional painting. I stand still and I look at the world, and there's a sort of emotion in the face that is almost like so distressed and holding the hands back into the back. And I wanted size to be big in order to engage with the figure as if you're passing by and actually meeting someone. rather than seeing it as a picture. I wanted to have it more like real life experience, and that needed size. But yeah, it's interesting. I also love to hear how people experience that, because for me it's in the process of thinking about it and working and responding to feeling.
I think for me, walking through, you know, the portraits that are smaller, especially something like this where, you know, it's quite small and it's just the face is really present. I am so inclined to approach it and engage with it and get close to it. And then with the painting that you were speaking of, Sapphic in the Cornfield, it's almost like confrontational. Like you stand across from it and you are reacting to the size of your figure in the painting. Whereas here, you're entering into this interiority.
Yeah.
Versus there's some exteriority at the
Yeah, and I
larger
guess
scale.
big paintings are like experiencing the image in front of you as if you're like sort of equal. And like having a small painting, like they always remind me of like the more like personal sort of like love tokens from like 16th century paintings, where they gave like little miniature portraits or secrets, like stories in the back of a painting or something. And it's almost like a little fragment of time that you capture in a small size that you can bring with you to another place. And yeah, I like both sensations, and they do something completely different. But a small painting can be as strong and impactful as a really big one.
Totally, sometimes stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
You talked a little bit about time and memory already, but one thing that I'm curious about is that not only do your paintings feature portraits of you in different places, but they also show you wearing clothing from various historical periods. What role do you think clothing plays in your practice?
A really big role. I would say it's almost the center of my inspiration. It's a tool for inspiration because it's a way for me to engage with art history, with storytelling. It's a strange obsession of just an extreme love for craftsmanship and detail, and then gender roles that I feel like frustrated about in art history, but also seeing it more like still in our current time. Like whenever I dress up differently, I get different responses. And that means also about like what we expect of genders to present ourselves in. So I think that's a sort of inspiration to play with clothing. Yeah, it's a major part of all the paintings. And I collect a lot of historical costumes, and I have studied fashion, and I still make clothing for the paintings. And in my process, I wear the clothes and I write about them. Like I could wear like a 3-piece suit on the beach in Margate where I work, and then have a long beach walk, and then sit somewhere and write about that experience. Like I could think about like my childhood, and then wearing that suit and writing a little story about that moment on the beach could serve as an inspiration, as a memory that when I come to the studio, I engage with a canvas with all that source of material, and clothing brings me into that state. All these portraits in the show, they always come from experiencing the clothing first, and then the paintings are sort of echoes and responses to that.
How do you feel like the clothing supports these different selves that you're presenting?
It's a way for me to say we can be many ways, and we can be many things, and we don't have to know who we are in life. And I guess painting myself in a sort of like tight corset or very sort of sensual female body showing it in the paintings, and or like wearing big skirts and ribbons, but at the same time also wearing three-piece suit or high hats or old working clothes of old fishermen. They all tell me that I could be many things, and the sensations of wearing those clothes could tell me new things about myself. Like, choosing self-portraiture is a very specific thing, and it's not that I'm only like, I'm not trying to like sort of like show myself to people. I'm trying to like set myself free and say like I am a variety of selves, and no one will tell me who I am, and that is just a liberation. I wish I could do that in life. Like the other day here in New York, I was wearing a big skirt, and I was traveling back on the subway, and I just felt a bit vulnerable, which I don't feel when I wear a suit. I feel very strong, and that is just a very simple example of what clothing can do. And yeah.
So your paintings to me recall the work of many canonic artists. I read Holbein in Blackwell and Hastings, and echoes of Picasso's Blue Period in the Brown Jacket, which I think is over there. I'm curious if wearing a period garment, especially those that are historically associated with men, help you relate to the artist that you're referencing beyond just their pictorial conventions.
In the process that I don't necessarily reference to artists, but I have been like learning from art history, especially like educating myself on art, and like going to museums which are mostly Western art museums, and they have a lot of like post-impressionist French artists, and being Dutch, seeing like Van Gogh and Rembrandt, and those elements are part of my sort of self-education, and I am sort of deliberately responding to what I've seen and what I've learned from, and what has been sort of like imposing on art history, or like ruling art history in Western art, and then deliberately sort of responding to it. So when people say like, "Oh, you must be influenced by Van Gogh because your colors are the same," I do that deliberately because I like to play with that certain Dutchness that we refer to as Van Gogh, working with that. And I think, yeah, the colors, the costumes, they are all elements of art history that I play with, and then I'm this modern contemporary woman who is like, I am lesbian, I am dressing in a way that is or like historical, and then I place myself within imagery that I've grown up with. It comes from this very stubborn idea that working for years on my own and not having anyone look at my work, or not being able to like paint within a certain like community of other painters or schools, I think it has grown like, I'm gonna paint myself into that. I'm gonna become that art history, almost like as a sort of like goal for becoming a painter. And then it was mixed with a frustration of like everything I see around me at the time that I was going to galleries is like men being like amazing painters and amazing art that is so inspiring. I'm really inspired by Edvard Munch and Van Gogh and Rembrandt, like the technical aspects in their lives and the stories they've created is beyond inspiring. But I also felt a sort of like frustration of, or like insecurity, like can I be that if we're looking at gender and like the representation and the lack of representation of female painters. And then I found a lot of female painters in art history who were making self-portraits and who were playing with dressing up, like Romain Brooks, is this American painter who used costumes as well. And I've grown into responding to art history in my process, to almost like make a mark, like what is the meaning of a portrait, and can we challenge the way we look at the things that are taking over the big galleries, and what does it mean if a lesbian woman dresses up exactly the same as that old man in the National Gallery? Like, do we judge her for dressing up like that or posing in a sort of static way? Or, can we strip away the meaning of status and the meaning of clothing, specific gender sort of focused? It's all about wanting to create a freedom for all to express in our own way.
And in one of your paintings, I think it's called Dinner in Florence, there's this miniature, I think, nude version of you, and their arms sort of melt into the fabric of the shirt that you're wearing. And this sort of blurs the line between the self and the garments one wears. So I'm curious how you think about, you've touched on this a little bit when you were speaking about the corset or the skirt versus the suit. How do you think about clothing in relation to your own body?
Well, with a painting like Dinner in Florence, you see the figure placed upon the clothing, and I think it comes from an interest of the unseen versus the seen. So when I use portraiture and static portraiture as an element to my, like the way I make my paintings, I could make self-portraits in a very abstract way. I could like paint only in colors and talk about my emotions, but I want to challenge portraiture, the meaning of it. You have the element of the scene, which is the appearance of a person, and the face, or the way you present and you pose, and what you wear, and then we judge on that. And then I use sort of like ghost figures within the space of my sort of being, as an element to show the unseen, which is like emotion or memory or a certain desire that is part of your way of being, which we don't see in portraiture. Like it's an appearance, and I think those sort of floating figures within the clothing, they are elements of what's inside of me, and they sort of come out as a sort of allegorical figures, and people view that in different ways. It could give different feelings to people, but for me it serves in the process of making and to make sense of things together.
How does clothing relate to your storytelling?
I mean, garments carry so much meaning. I'm particularly interested in old garments because they carry time and they have mysteries in them. Like when I find a really old tailored suit jacket with a lapel that you don't see anymore, and the fabric is made in a certain combination that is not being produced very often anymore. Like I imagine things like who would have worn that, what would have happened in that jacket, and what's the person who wore it, what would he or her has said. And I think it brings me already back into like a story of imagination. And then at the same time, wearing it, experiencing the clothing, they bring me into a state of being, and they give me a sort of poetry to life that you sometimes feels like is like what is it all about, and like are we defined by birth, like what our story is going to be, or can we play with it? And there's a lot of beautiful expression in cross-dressing and drag, and like I think it almost comes to that point that you create your own way of being, and clothing gives stories like that to me, and the sensation of those sort of static garments that have a lot of craftsmanship in it. It's just, it adds another layer of being.
I think your interest in older garments is so fascinating, and I'm curious if in wearing some of these clothes and depicting them in your work, do you sort of see these paintings as an act of preservation?
There's definitely an element to it that I almost like wish that we would never forget that craftsmanship. And luckily there's a lot of people who are interested in connecting still with that old way of expressing and playing around with costumes and sort of like cherishing the way clothing makes you feel and taking care of clothing for a lifetime, what it can actually add to your life. And yeah, in the paintings I kind of want to collect that because they're not imagined, like I don't want to paint myself into an art history, like a long lost, forgotten world. All the clothing are with me in my bedroom and I hang them like around my bed and I enjoy them and they are actually real and they are present in my life. So it's a collection of time. And besides preservation, I would say it's just a long search for the variety of self that clothing can give. And that is part of the whole process.
And I love that your paintings are sort of capturing those moments of different selves and that I feel so lucky I can visit them.
Yeah.
And see them.
Yeah, I hope it can encourage other people to play around with their identity. It doesn't have to be historical, because there's beautiful contemporary clothing as well, but I'm not against contemporary clothing, but it's just the way to play around and set yourself free.